Good evening. Good evening. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Come on in the space, you guys. I hope you're on and going to join me tonight. We have a great conversation and dialogue to be had. So come on in. Let me know you're here. Um, we got stuff to talk about. Part 2 from last week. So come on in the space. Yes, let me make sure everybody can be public. Come on in. Come on in. Drop a comment. Let me know you are here. Come on in the room. Hey, Teresa. Good to see you in the space. Good to see you in the space. Come on in, saints of God, of the Most High. We got Slow coming in. Come on in, come on in. Come on in. You guys know I don't care. I don't wait for too long before we get started because the dialogue is that good. And I do believe when we share it and people go back on my page all the time and they rewatch it. Hey, Sister Drumgo, Kilgore, thank you for being in the space. Come on in, come on in. Let me know you're here and we can go and get started. I'm going to give one more minute because I want us to have as much time as possible to kind of just, wrestle with some of this stuff. Last week, in honor of Pride Month, we talked about, hey, KK, we talked about, hey, Pastor Eunice, good to see you on. We talked about what it meant. What does it mean to be able to not get stuck all the time when it comes to our theology, right? So we want to continue with that conversation tonight, and our special guest just dropped so many nuggets on us about how do we do this love thing, even if we disagree. Hey, Key, good to see you on. I hope you're feeling good. All right, listen, I got 9:03, so I want us to go ahead and get started. So let's do it. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Tisa's Rants and Musings. I hope you had an awesome day and been having an awesome week. Listen, I want you to stop scrolling and I want you to come into this space because tonight we have a dialogue that is critical to us as believers, is critical to us as particularly if you're a person of color. It is critical to us just as being humans, right? Sharing this world with so many diverse and varied people, right? So this is a dialogue that we started last week again in honor of Pride Month. We wanted to talk about the don't ask, don't tell policy that the church often has with the LGBTQAI plus community, how it's harming us and how it has harmed so many, where people have walked away from the church wounded and hurt because they didn't feel God's love and acceptance. They didn't feel, all because we didn't agree theologically. And so we were challenged last week to start thinking about how we still be able to say, I don't agree with everything, but doesn't mean I can't still affirm who you are in God, that I can't still affirm that you are loved and still the beloved of God. I can still affirm that, listen, we all in this together, trying to get it together and honestly speaking, hey, Glenda, as people of color, especially as Black people, we cannot afford to leave anyone on the margins. We cannot be satisfied with allowing any parts of our communities to feel disengaged and disconnected from the rest of us, especially when the social justice movement was birthed from the church, when the movement for freedom and liberation is part of who we are as believers. We can't continue to be okay with other people being oppressed. We can't continue to sit on the sidelines quiet while any parts of our community is oppressed, is maltreated, is it just because they are different? You don't have to agree, is what we talked about. We don't have to agree on everything, but what we can agree on is that for God so loved the world, hallelujah, that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believe in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Hey, Jackie, hey, Tamia. So listen, we want to continue the dialogue because I'm struggling. My struggle might not be with the LGBTQA plus community. My struggle is if I'm going to be authentic with our white Christian brothers and sisters who have been Trump supporters, who have been on the side, to me, the wrong side of social justice. I'm struggling with my love. I'm struggling to understand and to process how am I supposed to feel about them right now, and what am I supposed to do with that? So help me welcome that into our space onto the show, Pastor Gerard Jameson, yay, who last week stopped by and blessed us, dropped so many nuggets to help us move past always getting stuck with what we agree with, what we don't agree with, getting stuck with, you know, our biblical interpretations and being more Bible thumpers, Pastor Gerard, as you mentioned, being more about the letter of the law
Mm-hmm.
than about the spirit of the book, right? So we're
Right.
we want to quote these scriptures. We want to, you know, beat people over the head on the scriptures that we agree with, because we don't bring up our own issues. We make excuses for our own issues. We make excuses for our own shortcomings, but on certain sins, if we want to call them sins, or certain things that we may disagree on, we want to,
Right.
you know, really beat people in the head with. So
Right.
you said something about Jesus's nevertheless. Okay. I
Yeah.
just need you to talk about that again and just kind of help us process how do we get and understand what that nevertheless is supposed to look like
Right.
for us.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad to be here again. Um, I'm in a place with much better and more stable internet, so we
Yay.
shouldn't have the challenges from last week that I had. But I've been pondering on and wrestling over this idea of the nevertheless, and as much as I'm trying to stay away from biblical theological understandings of this, there's just something about it that we can't get away from. And the truth of the matter is, when we talk about the nevertheless, Jesus gave us the foundation for that before he even talks about the nevertheless. It is my belief and my particular theology that Jesus forgave even before there was this sense of our forgiveness. And I
Mm,
believe that because if it had not been for Jesus's not only willingness to forgive, but the action of forgiving, he wouldn't have come down at all. And so his coming down was a reflection of the forgiveness. But what that also means is we've got to recognize our part in participating in that forgiveness, meaning we've got to do some self work. We've got to come to the
mm,
place where we begin forgiving ourselves before we can think about
mm.
forgiving others. And we've got to think about how we love ourselves before we begin opening up spaces to invite others into love, irrespective of our position on whatever kind of lifestyle they live, whatever they may be doing or feeling. And so I couldn't help but think about the text in which one of the religious scholars comes to Jesus and asks, well, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus says that you love the Lord your God with your mind, with your soul, with your heart. And that the second was the like unto the first, that you would love your neighbor as yourself. and that these two commandments, all the laws and the prophets hang on.
Wow.
And part of what that is a reflection of to me is that we have got to do a better job and more work in understanding who we are, that we get to a place where we forgive ourselves for our past poor decisions and indiscretions, so that we no longer look at individuals who may have stumbled and fallen as being any different from us or any less worthy of that forgiveness. Because if we truly love the way we love ourselves, the measure to which we love ourselves is the measure that we dole it out. And so if we don't have self-love and if we don't care enough about ourselves, then we're not going to care about our neighbors. And we're not going to care about those who've been pressed to the
Yeah.
margins.
And and to me that's the whole healing is the only agenda, right? Because when
Right.
you don't heal from your own past hurts, mistakes, things that have impacted you, you will perpetrate those same things onto
Right.
others. You will
Right.
be, but you also said something that just made me think about doing that self work, doing our own work, and sometimes I have been surprised at people to me who have been through some of the same things they would see someone else go through, and they would
Mm-hmm.
be so much harder. They would be no compassion, no empathy for what that
Right.
other, and it's like, shouldn't you know? You know what that's like,
Right.
right? Why
Right.
are you not more empathetic when you've been there?
Right.
Right? You know, like
Exactly.
people who've been delivered from drug addiction, but then when they see current drug addicts, they're so harsh
Mm-hmm.
about how they respond to them and how they treat them. And I don't understand why when we have been through similar things or know what things are like. I look at sometimes women who've been cheated on and
Mm-hmm.
hurt and wounded by men, and they still come out dogging another woman,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Dogging
Right.
and not believing her story. And so it's just so weird to me. Like, well, if he and I think me and my girlfriend Key had this conversation, but if he lied to you, why don't you think he was lying to her? Right. But somehow it doesn't translate into more empathy and compassion for one another. Is that a sign then that we haven't been? No. Yes, hurt people hurt people. Uh-oh. You're frozen. You're frozen. I don't know if it's me. Are you guys are seeing him being frozen? Okay, wait. All right. I wasn't sure if that was me or if that was on your end.
I don't know.
You just froze up. Okay. My connection saying is a little stable as well. So you're just gonna believe God.
Right.
But okay, Key said I was breaking up. So it could be on my end. Okay, I need y'all to pray. Pray that this connection stays good because this is such an important conversation,
Right. Right.
right? What is it? We got to do the work, right? Because we can't keep the same cycle, right? And one of the things I think that came out, tell me what you think, that came out of this pandemic was because the church got hit so hard as well. To me, shows that we are already still on the margins as
Mm-hmm.
Black people. It didn't matter your title. Apostle died, pastor died, lay member, deacon. It doesn't matter the title that they carried in the church. The church got hit just as hard.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
understanding that means we can't afford to keep going and treat each other these same ways. So how do we model this nevertheless? That Jesus started, as you said, before he even said what he said in the garden.
Mm-hmm. Right. In my pondering over this, I think I agree with you 100% that we tend to project our own insecurities and our own faults onto other people, especially when they struggle through the same things we either are currently struggling through or have struggled out of. But I remember when I was in a therapeutic relationship with a psychologist, and I was really struggling with some degree of insecurity. And I said, I need to practice more self love. And he corrected me. He said, no, you don't need to practice more self love. You need to practice more self compassion, because
Mm,
with the kind of heart you have, if somebody else was dealing with the same challenges you're dealing with, you would have compassion for them, and you would walk with them, and you would deal with them in ways that are reflective of what is necessary for them to feel a degree of confidence or pride in who they are. And he said, but something is preventing you from doing it for yourself. And it's something that I think communities of color, but specifically African American communities, need to really wrap their minds around. Um, we cannot be who God desires for us to be if we ourselves are not walking toward wholeness, if we're not working toward being whole as individuals. And so when we don't have compassion with ourselves, it's easy to not have compassion with others. And so one of the first things I always advocate for, even if you think you're well, is to get in some kind of therapeutic relationship that will allow us to expose any areas that are hidden within us that make it such that we will project all of our own negative feelings onto someone else. We can't engage or embrace people who may be different from us or in different varying life circumstances, or perhaps even in the same situations as us, if we don't handle or deal with the challenges that we are confronted with on our own. So that to me is the very first thing that we've got to do. I am not dismissing or diminishing the importance of a relationship with God and having conversations with God,
right,
but I
right,
also don't forsake the necessity of us being able to be in some kind of therapeutic relationship, because it gives us a greater perspective around who we are as individuals. And it helps us to hone in on who we are and what our particular worldview or lens might be. How are we viewing the rest of the world? Because if we're doing things and we're discriminating against individuals without any real understanding or sense of why we're doing it, then it just becomes hate.
right.
And we've got to walk away from hate. I may disagree with you, but I don't have to hate you. And I may not believe in what you're doing, but I don't have to hate you. And if I know more clearly um, the reasons behind why I do the things I do and what triggers I have, then it becomes easier for me to just sort of dismiss your capacity to be, which is problematic.
Yeah.
We think that seeking this kind of assistance or help is in some way lacking in faith. God can do all things, so I don't need to be in therapy. But you do. You need to be in a therapeutic relationship because um, these things help us to live into the communal faith that Christianity is. When
Wow.
we deal with our own individual stuff, we can be better used in a communal setting,
Wow.
because the whole is never greater than the sum of its parts. The parts
Wow.
have to be well in order for the whole to be well.
It's so interesting. I did not think this is where the conversation would go, right? I did
I
not
didn't
think
either.
I didn't think that this is where it would lead us to, but if the foundation of being able, if we're challenging ourselves to be able to embrace the LGBTQAI plus community in a way that is godly, right?
Hmm.
In a way that isn't exploitive, meaning we don't just fleece
Hmm.
their talents, but deny
Right.
their personhood, or where we have this don't ask, don't tell policy with them, or because the minute they say it, then we sit them down and we don't want, as if we didn't know by their clothing and attire that they've been telling us, we're like,
Hmm.
we don't know. Um,
Right.
if we're challenging ourselves to change the way that we are dealing with them, I wasn't expecting the answer to be and change the way how you're dealing with yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's essentially what it sounds like you just said to us, that you are not going to even have the capacity to speak about this, never to engage in this nevertheless love that we're talking about, if you're still broken, if
Yep.
you haven't um, entered into a nevertheless with yourself, if
Right.
you haven't said, nevertheless, I'm still going to love me. I haven't done all these things right. Nevertheless, I know God loves me. And because He loves me, I can love me. Nevertheless,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be compassionate with myself. Nevertheless, I'm going to have grace for myself.
Yep.
Sure, I feel like I should have done this differently, or I should have been here differently, or this place in my life by now. You know, we all got those things running our heads, or what could we have done differently for a different outcome of this and
Mm-hmm.
that. Nevertheless,
Yep.
I'm going to be compassionate. Nevertheless, I'm going to gift myself healing by entering into a therapeutic relationship with someone. I'm going to gift myself wholeness,
Yes.
right? And I think of all the time the man at the pool of Bethesda, right? Bethesda,
Mm-hmm.
I think I said it right. When Jesus had to ask him,
Yeah. Yeah.
wilt thou be made whole? Do
Yeah.
you really want to be whole? A lot of people now are talking about wholeness and getting whole and being whole. And the truth is, not everybody is even in a space where they're saying that this is actually something they want, because to get whole
Right.
requires work. You got to get up. You got to actually enter into a relationship that you might be afraid of, or you're
Yep.
good with staying stuck in where you are. And so everybody's not going to do this, just like everybody's not going to get vaccinated, right? But
Right.
then how do we transform the world? If
Right.
the world knows us by a love one for another, then how are they going to know? And this is why they don't know us,
Right. That's
because
so
they
true.
don't see Jesus is nevertheless being modeled amongst us.
That's right.
And I'm struggling. Like I
Absolutely.
said, I'm not coming from I've arrived space. I'm coming from, I'm struggling to get there, because I think it should bear to mention that oftentimes we, as people of color, seem like we're always on the end to forgive our oppressors. We're always on
Mm-hmm.
the end to forgive. And I told you, I heard somebody say, Jesus was on the cross, but he said, Father, forgive them. He
Mm-hmm.
didn't say he forgave them. But then when I look at that, Gerard, I'm like, but someone said to me, one of the ways that you know that you are healed is when you can genuinely intercede for that person that hurt you. When
Right.
you can genuinely, and although Jesus didn't say, I forgive you, he in his compassion interceded for his enemies.
Right.
He didn't just intercede with his death for us. He interceded for those who were murdering him in that moment. And so I'm torn.
Yeah.
Torn with the nevertheless and the wait a minute. I need y'all to understand what you've done and the hurt that
Right.
you've
Right.
caused. And
Right.
I'm not. I feel like that's I'm gonna lose that accountability.
Yeah. Forgiveness is not mutually exclusive from culpability. Just because you forgive, there doesn't mean that the infraction or the infringement disappears. There still needs to be a reconciliation of what happened between the one who has harmed and the one who has been harmed. When Jesus makes that proclamation to the Father to forgive them for what they've done because they don't know what they're doing, it wasn't without consequence. There's always a consequence to whatever action we take. So by me saying I forgive, it's not saying that I'm letting go of what you've done to me. It's saying I'm giving you a space to make this right. And so,
Mm.
the funny thing is, we would never want God to deal with us in the way we deal with some other individuals. And so, because we are unwilling to forgive them, we don't see what that looks like from the other end. If we've ever been in relationships where we've not been forgiven and we've done all that we can to forgive, we can't understand in the fullness of what it means to be excluded or isolated from a community, if we've never ourselves been in that situation. And so we're not fine with people hurting us, but we have to be willing to ask for forgiveness and to allow them to hurt us.
Oh, I don't know. He froze again. I don't know if it's me or him. Can you guys still see me? All right, he's coming back.
I remember where I was. And so, you know, we have to get to a place where we recognize that forgiveness is not about forgetting, but forgiveness is about creating a space for individuals to make this reconciliation, to have this recompense. Um, when we don't recognize that we are often the victims of the same kinds of transgressions we're perpetrating, then we don't have the same degree of compassion. Jesus was not wrong to ask for forgiveness for those who sought his crucifixion, but he also was not going to allow them to forget what they did. And I think, especially and not thinking about LGBTQ plus communities right now, when I think about just race relations, for example, African American to not forgive those who have oppressed us. However, it doesn't allow us to move forward. And so the forgiveness is there, but we still have to hold their feet to the fire and say, listen, yes, you're forgiven, and you're invited back into this space, but that doesn't mean that there aren't consequences for coming back into this space. All the forgiveness does is offer up an invitation. And if you want to come into the space and receive that invitation, just know that there are conditions with it. You've got to do the work of helping to bring some balance back into this community, because you've thrown this off. You've thrown this
Right,
balance off with your
right.
behavior.
I
And
would,
so, what
I
I
would.
think is,
Mm-hmm.
with communities that are oppressed, we have to ask for forgiveness, but they have to be the ones to open up the space to receive us. We can't just say forgive and then with the expectation that everything will be set right. No, we have to do the work. When we were in seminary, I'll never forget this. We talked very explicitly about gendered language for God, and how we should, if we were going to truly make things right for the 2,000 years that we've called God Him, we would have to call God her for 2,000 more years, but then another 2,000 to set things right. And so there are consequences to the forgiveness that we have to engage in. And we've got to know that when the forgiveness is offered up and the invitation is given, we can't just walk in with the expectation that no, there's nothing else to do. You've offered your forgiveness and that's it. Um, we've got to do a lot more work.
And it sounds like you're talking about boundaries. And
Hmm.
I think again, this is so interesting because it's all connected. When
Right.
you don't have enough self-compassion, your boundaries are weaker, right? And so
Hmm.
when you have weak boundaries, just so you know, I think we can hear a lot of
Oh,
your,
that's me. Sorry.
yeah.
That's
um,
better.
when your boundaries are weak, then we do engage in those behaviors that are seemingly where we forgive without any idea of the cost, or we say we've forgiven. I think a lot
Hmm.
of us in our community have said we've forgiven, but forgiveness can be a daily act. Sometimes you have
Yeah.
to choose to forgive someone who's done you grave harm on a
Right.
daily basis. It's not just so easy to just, oh, I forgave. Not everything's going to fall that way,
Right.
especially around social justice, especially around how we as the church have wounded so many people, especially from the gay community, how they've been molested in our churches and then we put them out as a result, right? How they have
Exactly.
come into the church offering up their gifts and we've pretty much left them on the margins,
Exactly.
exploited and used them. We have in so many ways, there's work for all of us to do. There's work for us to do as a body. Oh, excuse me.
Bless you.
Okay. Sorry. There's work for us to do as a body, there's work for us to do as a community. But at the heart of this has to be the the nevertheless love that you talked about and that you're lifting for us now. The nevertheless is what led to that forgiveness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he loved us that he died. It's because he loved us that, or she, as we would say, like all the gender, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Thank you, Key. But because she loved us, right? But even that, some of us struggle with even seeing God in the feminine, and we don't understand why, right? We don't get that the Bible was written by men to men. So we think that because
Mm-hmm.
they use he language, that it only has, if he's a spirit, he can show up as a mother, if to the
Exactly.
motherless. He could show up as, like, what, why do we put these limits on God? And
Right.
because we keep him so boxed in, God's not able to do what he could do to release us from being
Right.
boxed in. And now
Right.
we're boxed in and we're boxing in others. I
Right.
want to break out my box. I want to break out, um and I honestly want there to be a an alabaster box breaking for the Black community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Alabaster box breaking where we all come and we all pour our oil at the same time, because nobody knows the cost of that oil, right?
Right.
And we all come and pour it out without shame, without, this oil is filled, with all of this hurt, this harm that has done.
Right.
Yes, reparations. We got to come together and pour out our oil. But
That's
too
right.
far too often, it goes exactly how it went in the Bible. As soon as you start pouring out your oil and you get all extravagant, somebody's saying, "What? All it don't take all that. Why are they
Right.
doing it?
Right.
We could have sold that oil. We could have used that oil for something else. But that, why they
Right.
just want to show off that they have oil?"
Right.
We start doing all of this to each other. And I think the challenge that we're talking about tonight is when we see it happening for us, because we like to other all of this, right? We like to say, "Oh, that's not
Exactly.
me. Those are other
Exactly.
people do that." But we do it too.
That's
So
right.
how
That's
how
right.
do we then call ourselves, check ourselves when we get ready to go into that same old, routine of what she doing and what he doing and what that we think of, I gotta love them through this. I gotta love and nevertheless them. I don't, something
Right.
about them might rub me wrong, but God
Right.
giving me a nevertheless. Like, what do we got to do? Is this something, one of those things? And I often wonder about this, Gerard. Is it one of those things that only come by prayer and fasting? Like, is this something we need as a body to fast and pray about love? How to love?
That's a great question. And for me theologically, I think that that's only part of the dimension. I really am a firm proponent in mental health care and good mental health care.
Yes,
In the text that I just read, it says with your mind, your soul, and your heart, talking about the wholeness of an individual. We can't
yeah,
fast and pray if we are dealing with significant mental health challenges. We have to deal with that stuff.
it's
And then
true.
when we look inside, so you make the comment about watching people who are exuberantly praising and looking at them and saying, well, it doesn't take all of that. But that response is grounded in something about what you've learned or experienced in life has helped you to come to that particular perspective. But we don't always have a good sense of what that is. And that's why I think the therapeutic relationships help us to pinpoint specifically why we behave in the ways we do. I might not like somebody from the LGBT community, and I have no idea why, other than this is what I was taught. But I've never interrogated that particular teaching. I've just been doing what I've been told. And so
Right,
it's gotten lost. For
right,
whatever reason, we light candles in the church, and it's happened for so long. We don't know why we light candles in the church. We just do it. And so
right.
this helps us to get to the space in which we're pinpointing the challenge. I do think fasting and prayer is important, But I also, again, I recognize, and I sound like I'm contradicting myself because I always say we practice this communal religion as individuals. And now I'm saying that we've got to focus on ourselves in order to get to the community. But we do. We need to be conscientious about the things that trigger us, because the last thing we need is for individuals to be triggered by something and then to begin demonstrating bad behavior. I need to
Which
know
is
what
what
my
we've been
triggers are.
doing.
Right. Exactly. And so, even if it's not a professional therapeutic relationship, we need to have individuals that we can be honest with, have real conversations with, who we aren't afraid to judge us, but who will hold us to account and say, listen, I get where you're coming from, but you may need to consider doing it this way or thinking about this, because without those kinds of communities,
Yes.
we will continue to other, we will continue to exclude, and we, at the end of the day, we won't function as holistically as we possibly can. I know the Bible I read says that Jesus came that we might have life and have it more abundantly.
Yes.
Abundantly, I want to replace that word with more holistically. It's not just that we have more, but that we have a greater holistic being. There's something
Yes.
about us that integrates the mind, the soul, and the heart all into one being. And when we think about integrating the three, I mean, really, when we think about it, that is part of the power of the Trinity. That it's individuals who come together to make one. So individuals making one. And so
Wow.
we are so many different components working together to be one full human being. And when we look at our bodies in this way and we look at ourselves individually as this way, perhaps we then begin to see that everyone else is walking the same journey. They're doing their very best to be as holistically viable as an individual as they possibly can. And so this is why we have to have this compassion, because just as I'm suffering to be who I need to be, they're suffering the same way. And we need to suffer together in getting this accomplished.
Wow. Wow.
No, I forgot what you even, but that's just,
Well, no, I mean, but what you just said
go
to
ahead.
me, especially with the Trinity piece, at the root of even that, engaging with each other to give each other a safe space to work on ourselves, we got to have grace, right? We need grace for ourselves. Uh-oh, is he stuck again? Oh, is it me? Is it him? I don't know. I don't know. Okay, wait. I think he's coming back. Y'all, isn't this good? All right, the enemy don't want us to get this. The enemy just don't want us to get these conversations, okay, to be fluid like this. So I was saying before you froze that you were talking about the Trinity, but at the heart
Hmm.
of all that is a grace, is a level of grace.
Right.
And we have to have grace for each other's journey towards wholeness.
Hmm.
Some
Hmm.
people are going to move
Right.
faster than others. Some people it's not going to take as much. Some people are pretty healthy. But we got to have grace for each other, which means we can't be so judgy, right?
Right.
As I'm
Right.
struggling through the process, as I'm not, not all there yet. There's some stuff that's going to be more difficult for me. I'm going to
Right.
have to add that component of fasting and praying, right? Because
Right.
that is a
Right.
hurdle for me. So, but to just give each other that safe space and that grace again,
Yeah.
bring that
Exactly.
back into our communities, back into our churches, to stop looking at each other. And again, um, I was doing a women's conference not too long ago, and I talked about I'm tired of people saying you don't look like what you've been through. I want to look like what I've been through. I want to be able to come to church looking just like what I've been through, and the
Hmm.
church see my need and be able to
Right.
say, listen, we are here for you. We
Right.
got your back. You need to lean on it. You got a shoulder over here. But we act like the church is the space now to say, okay, I just been through hell all week, but let me come dress it up
Right.
to come. When
Right.
the safe space, the house of refuge, the sanctuary is
Right.
the place where I'm supposed to not be judged for looking like what I just been through.
Right. Exactly. Amen to that. That's so true. And I love the imagery of the sanctuary because that was the place when the world was trying to get us and the world was trying to tear us down, and we can find relief from everything that had been going on. And so, what does become the space for those who are catching hell everywhere outside of the church to come in and then catch it in church too, under the
Yeah.
auspices of we just want to see you spiritually well. But at the end of the day, that all is a reflection of our relationship with God. God makes that determination as to whether or not spiritually we're doing what we should be doing. And because none of us are the arbiters of that, we have to trust that if this individual says they're working on this, that God is capable of taking whatever they're working on and whatever challenges they may be experiencing, regardless of whether or not we agree with it, because it's not about what we agree with. This is your own individual walk with God, and you're living it out in community. You're living it
Yeah.
out so other people see it. And the thing is, we should never be so concerned with how other people perceive what we do. And unfortunately, that's just too big of the problem with the church from right now. We are so consumed with what other people are doing or how they're perceiving us, instead of just being
Mhm.
able to go in and lay it all bare. I think biblically what happened was that when you really were repentant for something, you would lay out on the altar. You would lay on that threshing floor.
Yes.
And now we're too afraid to lay on anything because we're afraid of what people might assume about why we're
It's
laying on this floor.
true. It's true. I've been there. I used to love to lay prostrate on the altar crying
Yeah,
out to God. But every time I did that, they all thought I was engaging in some horrid sexual
right,
sins
right, right. And
that I
and
needed
it's
forgiveness.
unfortunate.
And you get judged. So what? Oh, she always crying, or she always like people who. And after a while, you just get tired,
Yeah,
of
it's true.
having to defend your extravagant
That's right.
worship. I love to worship. I can't worship without crying. That's how I pour
Right,
out my heart. But
right,
I've been in spaces where you want to hide that worship because you don't want people thinking you okay. Oh, she must be going through, and it's like, no. Do you get who we serve? It's a different
right,
space. I'm
right,
so grateful I'm here. Like it's a different space,
right.
and it just well, I gotta be honest, this conversation isn't leaving me feeling hopeful. And let me say why. Let me
Hmm.
say, if and I'm being transparent, right?
Right,
Because to love is to be vulnerable,
right,
right? To love extravagantly, like the extravagant love of God, right? Um, left Jesus vulnerable. It left him vulnerable to crucifixion. It left him vulnerable to people saying he must have had demons, which is why he was able to cast out demons. It left him
right,
vulnerable to people miscategorizing him and accusing him and lying on him and doing all these things. And he still had that nevertheless.
right.
I'm 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 feeling a little not so hopeful um about us changing and us really doing our own work, right?
Hmm.
Us really being able to see the God in others, right? To see
Right.
beyond whatever orientation, their sexual orientation, to see beyond their race, to see beyond their socioeconomic background, to see
Hmm.
beyond
Hmm. Hmm.
their clothing when they come to church and truly see God and what God may and see them how God sees them. We can't do that without doing our own work, and I'm just not convinced as a community that we are ready to do that work. I feel like churches are opening back up and we're going back to just doing church as usual.
It's true.
What will it take to get us to stop and reset and do something different that's going to shake
Yeah.
up? And I don't know what that is. And I know I shouldn't worry about God's children and his church. He knows how to take care of his own, but my heart gets heavy. Um,
Yeah. I just truthfully, I believe that COVID was precisely what we needed. And yes, we are getting back into these buildings, and we have this penchant to move back toward what we were doing pre-COVID. But the truth of the matter is, this has shown us on so many different levels that the way we've been doing things is not viable. Because if we continue to do things the way we've done them, we are subject to churches failing and closing. And so I would encourage everyone who is in some kind of ministerial authority or leadership to begin challenging themselves to think about what it was like during this COVID pandemic and the things about the church that they didn't like. I know that there are
Mm.
several clergy members who loved having to do worship remotely. Not because they didn't want to be in the building, but because it gave them a greater opportunity to reach more folks who weren't coming into the building. We have to be more creative in how we reached out to individuals, which meant we had to leave the building in order to do that. Um, the truth of the matter, in my estimation, is that it's going to take some bravery, but we've already been given the opportunity to do it. The foundation is there. We've had to be more creative and innovative. And if you're asking the question about, how do we find hope that people will be able to do this, I think this has given us the opportunity to not only reimagine or reinvent what the church looks like, but what our role in the church is. One of the things I've learned about, and I have to be clear with everyone who's on here because I don't think this was mentioned last week. I am a Black pastor who is serving a predominantly white church, and that has been the function of my ministry for almost 12 years. I've been serving primarily white congregations, and the challenges, the differences are not that much. The challenges are not that much different, is what I'm trying to say. We all experience the same kinds of challenges, but and I just forgot where I was going. But the reality is, um, when I think about what they experience and what they go through, we all just want to be in a space where our presence is valued. And it doesn't,
Mm.
like Tisa said, it doesn't matter what my socioeconomic background is. It doesn't matter my particular sexual orientation or gender identity. I just want to be seen and I want to be valued. And if we internalize this idea, this concept, or if we think about times when we weren't valued as individuals or as people, as whole people, I would hope that that would be inspiration enough for us to begin advocating for those who, by our very tongues, have been told they don't matter. Um, I can I can honestly say I've been in situations where I've made um, accusations or judgments about other individuals that when I'm looking back on it now, I feel ashamed about because I never should have said those things about those individuals when they're just essentially doing the same thing I'm trying to do to be a full human being and to demonstrate my calledness as a child of God. Um, and that's why I keep harkening back to this idea. We have to know what's inside of us internally, because if we don't understand emotionally and spiritually the things that dictate how we behave toward one another, we're going to continue to make the same kinds of value judgments and decisions about who is included and who should not be included into any sphere or any circle. Um, we all want to be the judge, but nobody wants to be judged. And, we all want to be the jury, but we never want to be the defendant. So all of these things have to be
That's good.
um, taken into account, as African American. And by no means am I saying the two are similar. Um, each one has a very different struggle. But when I think about the kinds of racism that Black people deal with, or any community of color, at the hands of people who have been taught from generation to generation to generation that there is a race stratification, that whites are um, deliberately more acceptable than any other group of people, I can't say that I'm earnestly and honestly okay worshiping with groups of people who treat me this way. But I also recognize that it's in the messiness that God can begin to create order.
Mm.
It's in the division and in the contentious environments that God can begin to bridge those gaps. And so if Jesus was coming to an environment,
No, no. Oh no. All right, he's gonna come back. Wasn't that deep though? It's in the messiness that God can create order. Yes, 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 yes. Oh, okay. I thought it was back. Oh my gosh. I hope you guys are enjoying. Listen, at this point, I don't know if it's still on who's in, but we got you back. No, did you go again? Oh no. He froze again. Hopefully he'll be back and give us some parting last words about yes, it's in the messiness that God can create that is deep. Because we are socialized, right? To believe that messiness is wrong. We're socialized to believe that messiness means that something bad is happening when God can be in the mess that mess is where he's
Mm-hmm.
abiding to create the order. And if we think about creation, um it was out of that void, out of that nothingness that he created so much. So if he could create out of nothing, surely he could create out of messiness, right? But
Right.
we don't have grace for the messy. We don't tend to have grace for it. And unless it's our own messiness, then usually we have excuses. Okay, but
Right.
we don't even offer ourselves much grace. But
Right.
but from what you're saying, Pastor Gerard, is that we gotta get comfortable with some of this discomfort. We got only a few
Mm-hmm.
minutes left, and I want to end on one last part of that, nevertheless, that you talked about. And for me, it's setting the expectation that this is not going to be easy or comfortable work.
Mm-hmm.
That the work of love, the work of seeing people and loving them beyond your opinions, seeing really truly seeing people and what their need is beyond
Mm-hmm.
your theological disagreements is going to cause discomfort. If we take that, nevertheless, where Jesus was in the garden, Jesus was sweating bullets. Okay,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Jesus was sweating. Um, and I don't care what we want to say. Jesus was had anxiety and fear in that moment. So, oh, my thing fell down. So, understanding that, oh Jesus, the enemy is just busy all
Yeah,
over.
very much.
Okay, stuff just happening. But
Yeah.
understanding that, right? Understanding that Jesus was dealing with that. He was going through discomfort. He was going through a painful time and situation. It was not something easy for him. He didn't come and just say, I got this. I'm about to go to the cross. Not a problem. I know what to
Mm-hmm.
do. He
Mm-hmm.
he had struggled with that thing. He asked God, can we think this? Like, can we maybe do another way? And then there was the nevertheless, not my
Right.
will, but your will. And
Right.
so there's that discomfort that has to happen, but then also a moving out of self
Right.
to say, I can't do this in and of me, God. Nevertheless, your will be done. This is what you're calling me to. I don't like it. I don't like how it feels, but nevertheless, I'm going to love. I'm going to be committed to loving like you called me to.
That's right. That's right. And if I can just add this one last point, um, and again, I've been trying to stay out of biblical narrative, but it's hard because there's so much
This is a
of it that
theological
is,
show. So come on with it.
yeah. But we love certain parts of the Bible, and other parts we tend to ignore. But I'm just reminded of the end of Matthew's gospel, and Jesus is talking and saying, When I was hungry, you fed me. And when I was naked, you clothed me. When I was lacking shelter, you provided. And the people said, well, when did we do that? When you cared for the least of these. But when I was
Yeah.
hungry and you saw me, you didn't provide anything. Yeah, I'm going to separate the sheep from the goats, those who understood and knew that there were marginalized individuals who needed to be embraced and taken care of. And this was the command that I gave when I said, love your neighbor as yourself. And yet we still find reasons and excuses to not live into that. And so we call ourselves Christians, which means to be Christ-like, but we don't really want to do the things that Jesus did. We do them when it's convenient. I always make the proclamation that it's the distinction between service and volunteerism. We volunteer out of the abundance of our time, but we provide service even when we're lacking. And so love has to
Oh,
be
wait,
the
wait, wait,
same
wait,
way.
wait, 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 wait. I got to get that. We volunteer out of the abundance
Hmm.
of our time, you said?
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
But service is self-sacrifice.
But we do service
Yeah.
even when we are lacking.
Yeah. We all have that one friend who calls us and we just, every time we see their phone across the screen, we sigh and, well, I don't want to deal with them. But that conversation may be the very thing that helps that person through whatever their situation is. And so it's not a gift of volunteerism, it's a sacrifice. That's what
Wow.
love is. Love is sacrifice sometimes. And that's what Jesus demonstrated. It was a love, it was a sacrifice. It's not easy. Like you said, Tis, it's a lot of work. It's scary sometimes, but service often is. We call those who go off to war service people because they're providing something that they may not necessarily want to do, but it's at the benefit of everybody else who receives their service.
Wow.
And so I'm not going to give an hour a month to go and do this one thing. I'm serving wherever I go. And we, as the children of God, have to recognize that serving is going to mean doing things that we don't often want to do, loving people that we've been told are not worthy of love, and acknowledging that I'm not doing this for a short time, but I'm in this for the long haul because I want to see the benefit of my service that you might live a more holistic and abundant life.
Wow. That's so awesome.
So that would be my one point. We've got to get out of a we've got to get into a service mindset because that service is indicative of the love we have, not just in our emotions but in our actions. It's not a filios love, it's not an eros love, it's an agape love, a love that says I am only concerned with your wholeness. I don't
Wow.
have to like you. I don't have to agree with you, but I am concerned about how whole you are able to live this life. And if I am participating in creating the kind of environment where love will rule and all people will have an opportunity to be whole, complete human beings.
Wow. Wow. And I love that. And I think if I add anything is I I want to see you be whole. I'm also not going to get in the way of your wholeness
Right,
because I'm afraid that if you're whole, then that somehow is going to make me look a particular way.
right,
Because I
right, right,
see that, right? That insecurity and that competition is like I want you to succeed, but not be better than me, not go greater than me. I'm good
right,
with you, not people in my life. They good with me as long as I don't. They think I'm not doing better than them.
right, right.
That's
Yeah,
not what
and
we're talking about, and that's not real
right.
love. That's not real serving. Those aren't even
No,
real friends, right?
right,
Those
right,
those frenemies that really are just um, there for you as long as they can keep you in the box of them still being superior.
exactly,
And
exactly.
that is not what God has called us
Yeah,
to. Sometimes we do. I watch.
right,
We do, and I think so. As the church, when we do service, we have to also do it with the mindset that we are Jesus' hands and feet. That we're
that's
doing it
right,
with a particular spirit, not like we're going into the bad neighborhood to give food to the poor people.
right,
We that our attitude about about service is what makes us who we
right,
are.
right.
That's what
And
separates from volunteerism.
right. And it should never be focused on self. Because if I'm only providing service because I want to be lifted up or praised, then that's not service.
Right.
That's self-service.
Right.
Which is and that's what makes Jesus's sacrifice so significant, because it was a sacrifice of self, but it wasn't self-service. He didn't do it for the acclaim and the accord. He do it so that we might be benefited.
Wow. We have so far to go.
Yeah, we do.
But God
and
is
and it
with
begins with sacrifice.
yes.
Sacrifice is better. Obedience is better than sacrifice, but in this time we need to be obedient in our sacrifice. And so
Yes.
when God says, go and do this, don't hem and haw, don't question, get up and move and go. It may be inconvenient to you. It may take away time from things that you have to do. But that obedience to go and sacrifice is something that is absolutely transformative. It will transform our churches. It will transform our communities in this world, but it will transform us individually when we recognize that the very one who sacrificed himself that we could live forever is calling us to be the same kinds of folks who sacrifice for the benefit of other people.
Wow. I told my mother, I'm going to write a book about what you're going to do when it's not about you.
Oh, I like that. That's
What is
good.
really going to happen? What you going to do when it's not about you? And um,
Yeah.
that is exactly what you're talking about. Pastor
Yeah.
Gerard, thank you so much for gracing us with your wisdom, your knowledge. I am forever blessed by your heart that I have come to love since seminary. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful that you are on the Lord's side, okay?
Yeah.
Because
And
you are doing a mighty work and you have blessed us. Thank you so much. Um, stay in the studio so I can
yeah, sure. And
thank
I
you.
just want to thank you for this ministry. I think that these are the kinds of conversations we need to
Oh Lord. And he just dropped it. Yes, studio. Yes, what you gonna do? Thank guys for being you guys are so faithful coming on, supporting me and supporting Teachers and Musings. I pray you were blessed by it. I know we had connection issues, and again, this is the world that we're living in. And pretty soon we're going to have it where it's not even going to be an issue. But thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you guys. Know that you can catch me on Vocal TV on the Inspired Living Network every Friday at 12 noon. If you ever want to go back and see another episode or catch one that you've missed, share this on your page. And tell people to come and watch some of these dialogues, because where else are they having it, right? Where else are we talking like this? In so many of our spaces and circles, we don't get to have this authentic dialogue and then hear from people with wisdom. I try to bring you guys that come with the heart for this work and with wisdom. And listen, I've been blessed for it. I've been transformed, and I'm glad you're with me. I love you all, and I'll see you next week. Okay, same time, same back channel, same back station. Bye.